Today is the very last day of the Xbox 360 marketplace. It's going down. Probably by the time you watch this episode, the store may have already closed. And I do want to take the time to talk to you guys about the Xbox 360 and my experiences with the system, because it's an absolutely incredible system that really just changed the trajectory of video games in so many ways. Now, coming off the original Xbox back in 2005, the launch of the 360, the hype levels were absolutely insane. This brand new system was promised to be a generational leap over the OG Xbox, and it absolutely delivered. I remember the launch of the Xbox 360. It was one of the very best presentations I've ever seen. They showed off this brand new system, touted this new era of HD gaming where everything would run at a minimum 720p, which I guess is a little bit misleading because we know the internal resolutions of many of these games didn't actually hit 720p, but the 360 had a very capable built-in scaler chip that could manage the up-resing quite well. And if you remember, the original launch model of the Xbox 360, which I believe was codenamed Xenon, at the time, things were kind of caught between a rock and a hard place. Many consumers were still using CRTs, and HD TVs weren't really cheap enough and kind of out of reach for many people. And the original model didn't actually have a HDMI connector or an output. It's crazy to think about today when we think about the Xbox 360 being a HD, console that kind of introduced HD to a modern era. But of course, they quickly addressed that with their second iteration of the console known as the Zephyr. And they also added support for 1080p with subsequent revisions. And this was something that I think they were looking at what PlayStation was doing, because the PlayStation 3 had HDMI and 1080p out of the box. But of course, you may remember that Microsoft did launch the Xbox 360 about a year earlier than the PlayStation 3. They really wanted to get a head start on the PlayStation 3, and I think it was actually the right move in many ways. Now, one of the more interesting things about the Xbox 360, and something that I did a lot of back in the kind of the late 2000s, early 2010s, was you could connect up a VGA adapter to the console, and there was a specific setting for VGA signals, which you could then connect up to a PC monitor. Now, why would you want to do this, you may ask? Well, during the days of the arcade games that I used to have, I used to own a couple of arcade machines. I still have one behind me, as you can see. This was really cool because you could also basically rig up your Xbox 360 to an arcade cabinet, and I played many, many hours of MAME 360, cave shooters, many games that really took advantage of being in an arcade cabinet. Now, the other thing that I loved about the 360 is the backward compatibility component to it. Leading up to the launch of the Xbox 360, Microsoft kind of stayed mum about whether the system would actually be able to run OG Xbox games. And if you may recall, the PlayStation 3 announcement was backward compatible via hardware, and this was made known via press releases and stuff like that. But when Microsoft announced it would use backward compatibility, or it would support backward compatibility, it obviously meant that it was being done via software, because by this point we knew that there was no hardware built in to support running OG Xbox games. And when people caught wind of the fact that the emulation layer of OG Xbox games on the 360 was going to be using software, it kind of came with some criticism, because no one really believed that the Xbox 360 could run OG Xbox games via software. But to the credit of Microsoft and their emulation ninjas, as they called them back then, they proved everyone wrong. Their internal emulator, known as Zifu, it would be up to the task, supporting around, I believe it was around 500 legacy OG Xbox titles. Now, due to the nature of emulation, software emulation, not everything was perfect. There are some games that kind of glitched out, ran too fast, or ran too slow. But Microsoft didn't care. They continued to support the backward compatibility of OG Xbox games for years. And I believe it was around 2008 when they finally decided to put a stop to that. And they had many, many titles on the backward compatibility program. And I might add, to this day, that very same emulator, Zifu, albeit with updates, of course, still powers the OG Xbox games that you're playing on your Xbox One or Xbox Series consoles via backward compatibility. Now, I think we have to talk about the security around the Xbox 360. As someone that was a part of the scene back then, I was very heavily invested. I knew a lot of people that were actively working on hacking the Xbox. The Xbox 360 was a very secure system until the entry points, the weak points were identified. And there were two main weak points of the Xbox 360. The first one was the DVD drive. Even though Microsoft spent millions of dollars incorporating a hypervisor technology into the system on a chip, which had eFuses, and I'll get to all that here just shortly. The first weak point that was really identified was the DVD drive. It was apparent that Microsoft didn't really spend too much time securing the DVD drive itself, and it was possible to flash a custom firmware onto the DVD drive and basically make the system believe that any burnt DVD that had a game on it was a real disc, and the system would then just boot into it. Now, Microsoft would catch wind of what was going on with this very quickly. They released a press release saying that they don't tolerate this, and anyone that's caught kind of cheating on Xbox Live would be banned. And they were able to slowly detect these burnt games that were playing on Xbox Live, and they subsequently rolled out what was known as ban waves. And there were quite a few ban waves that went over the generation of the Xbox 360, literally just hardware banning any console that was playing games from a burnt or a custom DVD drive, right? Now, in response to this, a very smart member of the Xbox scene community known as Commodore Forever started making custom firmwares to basically allow anyone that had any model Xbox 360 drive in their system to run backup games and circumvent any detection that Microsoft could do of Xbox Live. And there were many ways that this was done, and I don't want to talk about it in this video, but I did a very deep dive on the DVD hacked firmwares that ran on the Xbox 360. So check that out. I'll leave a link to that in the description below. But the DVD drive hacks by Commodore Forever lasted for the entire generation, pretty much up until the very last drive model was ever released. And Commodore Forever had basically released firmwares for every single one of them. And if you were able to burn your Xbox 360 games with the right tools, there was no way that Microsoft could really detect that you were playing games off burnt discs, and many people would do this, but many people also got banned. In fact, one of my early Xbox 360s, I believe, had the original Hitachi drive in it. I think it was the 3120L drive. I had an initial kind of custom firmware flashed on that, and this was before Commodore Forever stepped in and really kind of made the iExtreme firmwares. It was ultimately hardware banned off Xbox Live. Now, the second exploit that was very, very common is the hypervisor exploit, and this was done via the JTAG or the RGH or the reset glitch hacks that were released on the Xbox 360. Now, the hypervisor is kind of the gatekeeper of all things Xbox 360 related. It controls the CPU, it controls memory, it enforces code that has to be signed, otherwise it just won't run. If you tamper with an executable, a .xex file with a system that has not been modded, then it's not going to run that code. The hypervisor is going to step in and say you can't do that, and it's not going to let you run it. And basically, in order to get homebrew emulators, ports running on the Xbox 360, the only way to do that is to get access to the hypervisor. And there were obviously exploits to do this. Of course, the RGH3, I think, is the most latest one. I haven't really been following the Xbox 360 kind of modding scene in recent times, but what I will say is I still have my own RGH modded Xbox 360 I've had for years. And look, I love this system. Like, especially now when the marketplace is gone, you can still run any Xbox 360 game on a system like this. And it's something that I want to reassure people out there that anything that is available, you can find. Everything has been archived. Xbox 360 stuff has been archived pretty much since, the beginning. The thing about the Xbox 360 is one of the really unique parts of that system is what was known as Partnernet. Now, The Partnernet story is something I've also talked about on the channel, but essentially Partnernet was the tester, developer, QA equivalent of Xbox Live, where publishers would put their game on in order for reviewers to review games before they went live. It was also a means for themselves to do testing on Xbox Live in a sandbox that was not retail. And it was also something that basically QA testers used to QA games and just, do the kind of the traditional software development lifecycle on. But Partnernet was such a cool system, but it came with a side effect that there were leaks of many, many games that had come out on the Partnernet system, and they were made available sometimes months before the actual game hit retail. And there are stories about games such as Sonic 4. There's also stories about, Perfect Dark, and of course GoldenEye, which was a game that never came out officially on the Xbox 360. There was a version that was in development. And all these leaks that happened all originated from the Partnernet system, because there were people that were very smart that had scripts that could basically just log in every single day, see what was new, pull down that piece of code, and then archive it and have that available for later on. The Partnernet system was something that was very much used and abused, and it was something that Microsoft ultimately kind of did away with the launch of the Xbox One, just going into a more traditional sandbox environment that didn't have any access to a marketplace where you could just kind of download other people's, games and stuff like that. Looking back, the whole Partnernet thing was so unique and interesting, and there's just no way that it would fly in 2024. But being able to log into Partnernet and basically just download another publisher's games that had not yet released, it just seems wild to think about in 2024, in the days of, secrecy, NDAs and all that stuff. But for me, I think that Partnernet was really the original place where game leaks really started to happen, because every single week there was leaks on Partnernet about new games or new games that were coming, and some of these games never actually released, but it was an absolutely crazy time. Now, how do you actually get access to Partnernet? How does someone like myself get access to Partnernet? Now, back in those days, I was not working in the industry. I was just a fan of the Xbox, and obviously I knew people, and I was, someone that was in the scene, and I had a modded system of myself. But to get access to Partnernet, you need a development kit. So development kits obviously cost a lot of money, but one of the side effects, again, of what Microsoft was doing with the Xbox 360 was the red ring of death. Now, we know that many of the Xbox 360s had a issue where they would simply overheat and the red ring of death would kick in. And unless you did a complete reball of that system, there was really no way you could really recover from it. You could fix it temporarily, but unless you actually had the right tools or you knew the right person, once you had a red ring of death Xbox 360, it was pretty much time just to get a new system. The Partnernet thing was interesting because the red ring of death also happened on development kits, which were pretty much the same hardware, the same motherboards as the retail kits. So Microsoft would ultimately just throw these old, used dev kits that didn't work anymore into landfills and recycling plants. And people were able to basically pick up the pieces and basically Frankenstein together development kits that would then work. Now, back in those days, once you basically had a working development kit, there was really no security around the Partnernet system and what you could actually do. So there was no login and password or authentication that you needed to do. If you had a working dev kit that was connected to your network, you were then connected to the Partnernet system by default, and you could start browsing the store and just downloading anything that you wanted. Now, we can't talk about the Xbox 360 without talking about XBLA, or Xbox Live Arcade. This was a digital-only service that Microsoft had provided on the Xbox Live service that allowed you to download and purchase smaller bite-sized games from many, many different publishers. There was indie games that really put a lot of indie developers on the map. There was some really high-profile games as well. XBLA was just awesome because there was something there for everyone, and the service would update literally every single week with new content. Not only this, every single game on the service you could download for free. You could basically run what was known as a trial edition, and then you could purchase the full version if you like the trial edition, which would allow you to unlock achievements. It would allow you to publish your scores on leaderboards. It allowed online access, multiplayer access if that was available. And it was just a really awesome service. The best games for me, I mean, look, there are so many good XBLA games, but I remember games such as Shadow Complex, which I think released in 2009. Marvel vs. Capcom 2 was on the service. Geometry Wars, of course. Castle Crashes. I mean, there are fantastic XBLA games. Too many to mention here. Of course, Symphony of the Night was really a pivotal get for Microsoft releasing that on the service. Before Symphony of the Night came out, Microsoft had a limit on the size of XBLA games. They could only be, I believe, 50 megabytes, but they would then relax that restriction on the size limits when they released Symphony of the Night. And I think they've subsequently done that a few more times. But Xbox Live Arcade for me was one of just another of the important pillars of what made the Xbox 360 so awesome. And of course, we have to talk about the games. I mean, the Xbox 360 had so many fantastic games, not only exclusive games such as Gears of War, of course, 1, 2, and 3, with 2 personally being my favorite. There was obviously Halo 3, which was an incredible game. Halo 4, some people liked it, some people didn't, but you can't discount the technical brilliance of a game such as Halo 4 on the Xbox 360. Fable 2 and Fable 3 were obviously really big games for Microsoft. The Forza series is what got its trajectory and its momentum to push it into the Xbox One and beyond era. So many fantastic games. And of course, Call of Duty Modern Warfare. I mean, when this game came out, it really just made me rethink how I felt about Call of Duty all over again. The Call of Duty 3, which launched with the Xbox 360, was a fun game. I liked it, but it didn't really connect with me. And I was kind of getting a little bit bored of the Call of Duty franchise at that point. And then Modern Warfare 3 came out and just flipped the script completely. And it ran silky smooth on the Xbox 360. I'll never forget the first time I ever played that game. It just set my heart racing. It was just an incredible game. Other games, of course, including Oblivion, Skyrim, Grand Theft Auto 4, Grand Theft Auto 5. I mean, look, the 360 is a peak console from Microsoft. And I hate to say it, guys, but I personally can't see Microsoft ever reaching those highs again. I'm not saying it's something that they're actively trying to get to as far as trying to relive those moments and that time period, because obviously things have changed a lot in video games. But for me, the Xbox 360 is and always will be Microsoft's last best console. I don't think it will ever be topped in either sales or the amount of just, emotion that it really kind of brings out, and just the amount of amazing games that came with that system. A lot of really good exclusive games, some fantastic third-party games. Xbox Live Arcade, I mean, it was just the perfect system for all this content. Now, the good news is, even though the Xbox 360 marketplace is going down, or it's maybe already gone down, look, there are still ways to play Xbox 360 games going forward. Of course, I talked about getting a modded Xbox 360. There are people on eBay that sell them. There are a lot of people that have modded systems. There are people that will mod your system for you. And there's also emulation. And we have to talk about an emulator such as Xenia, which is only getting better and better every time I take a look at it. So Xenia is really going to be the emulator that preserves Xbox 360 games well and truly after the hardware is long forgotten about. And I'm very, very grateful for the developers that work on Xenia, because they're doing some incredible work. Now, if we take a look at Xenia right now, compatibility still is fairly low, all things considered. We should be a lot higher as compared to, say, something like RPCS3, but it's getting better. And the good news is about Xenia is one of the things I do really recommend Xenia for is XBLA games, these smaller XBLA games. It's very, very compatible with the majority of them. Now, of course, if you want to run your favorite AAA games or your bigger games, your mileage may vary, but the compatibility list is always improving. And every time I take a look at this emulator, even though, I think the last time was probably about 6 months ago, there's always iterations, there's always improvements. And look, I think we're at a point now where Xenia on a decent level PC can run a game such as Red Dead Redemption 1, which I might add still has yet to have a PC version, a native PC version, at 60 frames per second. And if you have a beefy enough PC, you can even run it at 4K and it just make it look absolutely incredible. So look, emulation, once again, will always be the savior of video games and preservation long before these systems have died out, and that includes the Xbox 360. But look, I've said enough for today, guys. Look, I love the 360. There's so many great memories of the system for me, both from an underground scene perspective, as I mentioned, and just the hardware itself is absolutely incredible. I've got great memories of it. Look, I did so many videos on the Xbox 360 over the years. And look, I love the system so much. I have many of the collector's editions. I've gotten rid of a bunch of them now, but I still have a few of them in my collection. And look, I was right there with everyone else in the 360 scene. It was the absolute best. And I am going to miss the Xbox 360. And it is a very sad day today that the marketplace is closing down. But long live the Xbox 360, guys. We're going to leave it here for today's episode. Tell me your stories and your memories of the Xbox 360 in the comments below. I love hearing people's stories about it. Whether you were a fan, you're a developer, you're someone that was in the underground scene, it doesn't matter. Let me know what you have to say in the comments below. I read a lot of the comments. But for now, guys, we're going to leave it here. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this episode, please don't forget to leave me a thumbs up, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye for now.